This is Bill Sherman, and I'm here to talk about the Venice project this fall. Unfortunately, as we're all aware, we weren't able to offer the Venice program, but Julie Bergman and I will be collaborating in two parallel studios, one in architecture and one in landscape architecture, to explore a range of issues that are raised by the city of Venice and the set of questions that we were going to be studying on site, but which we have adapted to studios that we will be conducting around the world through virtual means. As I think everyone is aware, Venice represents a city that is at the forefront of kinds of global concerns and changes that we are facing as a society. The most obvious in Venice's case being sea level rise, but it becomes particularly interesting in relation to the urban cultural conditions, set of social issues, a set of cultural issues that we are exploring, the kind of resilient structures that the city has developed over the centuries as a place with a unique and extraordinarily inventive history. And we're going to be looking at thinking about that level of invention and that history in relation to an imagination for the future. This is not going to be a studio about trying to preserve the present or looking back, but about looking forward to the future and thinking in radical ways about the future of the city as it confronts processes of inevitable change, not as a kind of single variable problem of thinking just in ecological terms, but recognizing that ecological changes bring with them and offer opportunities for rethinking the city in relation to cultural and social issues that we are facing more broadly. Students will explore these issues with a focus on the scale of their own choosing, whether looking at regional, urban, a landscape scale, a building scale, or the scale of individual experience. Whatever the focal scale, the students will be responsible for positioning their projects, taking a stand within a conceptual framework that embraces the multiple scales. As this slide suggests, the kinds of questions that Venice faces are being faced by cities around the world. Cities that have deep cultural histories, cities that sit at sea level in threatened landscapes that are facing such an array of challenges as we move into the next century, that we're actually going to position the studio in the year 2100. So that we are looking forward, we're looking to a condition that is currently uncertain, but we can think about the range of possibilities. The latest projections coming out of the National Organization Atmospheric Administration is somewhere between 1 meter and 2.5 meters of sea level rise by 2100. We can also anticipate significant social and cultural changes as being possible between them, between now and then. So we'll select a range of cities within which students will develop their individual projects. They may include, we're going to be developing and making the final choice of this in concert with the students, but they may include Venice itself, New Orleans, Miami, the San Francisco Bay Area, Washington, D.C., Shanghai, Amsterdam, Lagos, Osaka, Melbourne, Dhaka, Jakarta, Bangkok, Mumbai, cities around the world where these issues are front and center. As we're looking at this kind of unprecedented urban future, here just a NOAA map of Florida, Miami, Florida, in its current state, and projections if we were to get about 2 meters of sea level rise, of what that might mean for the city. again, we need to think in radical terms. We need to imagine the city in ways that aren't just about trying to play defense, but to think creatively and imaginatively, something that architects have been doing for centuries, imagining futures of the city, as in this early modern example, and building fragments of that vision, as in the section of Grand Central Station on the right. This kind of thinking has at times been utopian, as in Ron Heron's exploration here with Archigram in 1968, or here with Yona Friedman, and imaginative explorations of possible urban futures, or Constance visions of a new Babylon, and possibilities for a different spatial, cultural, social complexity. Here, pairing these two images, one of Venice and its rich spatial intricacy and complexity against Constance's vision on the left, gives a suggestion of the kind of thinking that we're imagining here in the studio. But recognizing that it's not simply utopian speculation that we're looking at or thinking about, that we want to be grounding these visions in realities, the conditions, just as Venice was a radical re-envisioning of the possibility of a city based on a kind of unprecedented ground condition that they chose to build in. We are imagining these possibilities for the city as being grounded in economic, social, political realities that are also deeply bound in the ecological processes and the flows related to their sites. Looking at these old maps of Venice and seeing how the city is formed by an understanding of the water flows, the inevitability of the lagoon as a determinant of the form of the city, we see a city that, in a sense, is formed like no other, and a spatial construct that evolves out of those kinds of understandings that in some ways predate many of the contemporary concerns that we see, that we're wrestling with today in our cities today. They operate at a local scale, at an individual scale. These concerns then play out at a regional scale, scales of understanding of the relationship to the city, to surrounding landscapes and regions, and we want to be working across all those scales in our studies. In some ways, this might have something in common with the Rising Currents exhibition that was organized by the Museum of Modern Art in New York, with a range of propositions by architects and landscape architects for a future for New York, and this done in the wake of Hurricane Sandy and its disruption of the city. A set of projects that, in a way, used the cultural, social, ecological concerns to come together. Or projects like those by Future Cities Lab, Natalie Cateno and Jason Johnson, studying the San Francisco Bay Area and imagining a set of projects that engage and create a kind of new cultural condition in relation to rising water, and a set of societal concerns about how we engage that waterfront. Or projects like Shampoo's project called Urban Reef that was proposed for the Hudson Yards in New York, that again study these networks and dynamics and systems to imagine ways of thinking about the city in new terms. Or the programs in China for sponge cities, here with the example of Turinscape's project for Xinhua, that imagine cities in ways that engage and work with these dynamic processes rather than simply building defensive structures. We'll be looking at cities that have developed strategies, such as Hamburg, Germany, that allow the infrastructure to work with the capacity for flooding and rising and fall, and looking also at the limitations of some of those strategies. But as we think about Venice as a model and as a paradigm, we want to be thinking about Venice in radical terms, not as a historical artifact, but as an amazing work of the imagination to construct a unique place of rich cultural engagement involving new political, social institutions, economic systems, as well as ecological sensibilities that, in a way, created a new and unprecedented reality in the Venetian lagoon. Our process will involve students working in interdisciplinary groups across the two studios, conducting research, in some cases those research groups defined by the geography of shared cities that they may be working on. In some cases, and at the same time, forming other groups and alliances, working around common issues that cut across the studios. This way, the students won't be working so individually as they will in developing this kind of material, but will be forming dense networks across the studio of shared expertise. But within that context, then developing their individual projects at the scale that they choose to develop. So it may be a building scale, it may be an individual moment of experience, it may be a landscape or a larger regional scale proposition the student is really focusing in on. Students will each be choosing one city that will be their territory, and we will be building that list together across the two studios. And I want to note that all cities that face sea level rise that we'll be looking at have both an ecological challenge and that's drowning their cultural assets, make their land-water relationship troubled. The studio puts forward that this conflicted relationship is the key to the city's future, not to their demise, that the cities will have the opportunity to reinvent themselves in positive terms. These studios are going to be conducted online. We will be using a range of software for interaction and communication. We'll be meeting at times as groups across studios. We'll be meeting at times individually. There will be plenty of opportunities for desk crits. We will be bringing in outside expertise, just as we would have done in the Venice program, as resources for the studio. And there is another opportunity that I wanted to mention, which will be that I'll be conducting a research seminar that is open to any student, whether they're in the studio or not, whether they signed up for the Venice program or not, who wants to investigate these issues in relation to Venice as a model for the future. It's called Lessons from Venice, and it is now listed in the catalog. That will continue to explore these issues in another format built around individual student research projects. So we hope you'll be interested in joining with us. Students who signed up for the Venice program will have first priority for the two studios, but we would like to welcome anyone who is interested in exploring the future of the city, the future of the urban experience in relation to these changes that will be happening no matter what we do at this point to mitigate it. And so we need to figure out how to imagine this future in a time of change. Thank you.